Starbucks is paying this man $100 million for 4 months to save it from a sad collapse, while their baristas need to work more than 6,000 years to make what their CEO makes in 120 days. The chain that changed cafe culture in America forever, and by changed I mean convinced us that tall means small, has been losing money for 6 straight quarters. That's the longest losing streak in modern history. This is not supposed to happen. It's like watching Michael Jordan miss 6 free throws in a row, but instead of Jordan, it's a mermaid with a caffeine addiction. People on social media are complaining like it's the apocalypse. Workers are crashing out and having breakdowns on TikTok. And I promise you, it's not even about the pay gap I mentioned. There's something darker happening behind those green aprons. So is Starbucks actually collapsing? Or can their new savior CEO actually save this caffeinated Titanic? Trust me, bro, after this video, you'll never walk into a Starbucks the same way again. And you'll finally understand why your barista looks at you with the same dead eyes as a Vietnam veteran having flashbacks. It is November 2025, and you're watching WiWiPEDIA. But first, huge thanks to today's sponsor, my parents. Dad, Mom, thank you for the basement that doubles as my studio and the leftovers I eat between takes. I know you wanted a doctor, but you got a YouTuber. I promise real sponsors are coming. I sent 3 emails to NordVPN yesterday and they only blocked me on 2 platforms. So that's progress. Speaking of starting from nothing, let's talk about how Starbucks began, and holy frappuccino, this story takes more wild turns than a Fast and Furious movie. It's 1971, and America's coffee culture is basically non-existent. People were drinking instant coffee at home that tasted like liquid depression. Coffee wasn't a lifestyle, it was punishment you endured to stay awake. Then 3 guys had what seemed like a brilliant idea. What if we sold actually good coffee? Revolutionary, right? On March 3rd, 1971, they opened their first store in Seattle, a closet-sized space that cost them $137 a month. Today, that same money in Seattle might get you permission to breathe the air for 5 minutes. So this is how Starbucks conquered the world, right? Nope. Plot twist, nobody wanted to buy their fancy coffee. By 1976, they were so desperate, they started selling cookware. I'm not joking. The manager was literally buying her own merchandise to fake sales numbers. But they didn't give up. They kept grinding. By the early 1980s, Starbucks had exactly 4 stores in Seattle and was known only to hardcore coffee enthusiasts, and, I'm gonna ruin the surprise here, they're all about to give up. But here comes the first turning point before they do. Enter Howard Schultz, a man from a poor family who would change coffee culture in America and the world forever. I'm going to put the jokes aside for a moment, and yes, that's physically painful for me, because this man's story is genuinely inspiring. Born July 19, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, Schultz grew up in poverty that most of us can't even imagine. His father broke his ankle when Howard was 7, and since there was no workers' compensation or health insurance, the family spiraled into even deeper poverty. At just 12 years old, Howard started working brutal jobs to help his family survive. By 16, he was steaming animal skins at a furrier for 5 cents per skin, inhaling toxic fumes all day just to make a few dollars. And here's what gets me. He always gave part of his earnings to his mother because he couldn't stand seeing his family struggle.
My mother had years and years of depression and all kinds of things. And she kept the house going because my father was kind of in and out of just a lot of bad jobs and stuff.
But he didn't let poverty define him. He clawed his way through college, became the first in his family to get a degree. After graduation, Schultz worked for a Swedish housewares company, and one day in 1981, he noticed something strange. A tiny coffee shop in Seattle was ordering an unusually large number of coffee makers. Why would a single store need so many coffee makers? Curious, he flew to Seattle to investigate. When Schultz walked into that original Starbucks store in 1981, something clicked. He described it as almost spiritual. The smell of fresh coffee, the passion of the owners, the potential he saw. I'd tell you more details about that moment, but this video is already getting long, and I'm editing this myself at 3 a.m. Subscribe so I can afford to hire an actual editor and stop ruining my sleep schedule. Fast forward a year later. At 29 years old, he joined Starbucks as Director of Retail Operations and Marketing. This was it. The moment everything was about to change. The poor kid from Brooklyn was about to transform a failing bean store into a global empire. But first, He had to convince everyone else of his insane vision. In 1983, Schultz went to Italy for a housewares convention, which already sounds like the most boring trip ever. But walking into an Italian coffee bar changed his brain chemistry forever. Baristas were like bartenders, customers were regulars, everyone knew everyone. He witnessed something beautiful, the third place concept. Write that term down on your forehead because it's about to become the most expensive concept in American history. Schultz rushed back to America with the enthusiasm of a kid who just discovered Fortnite. He wanted to transform Starbucks from a bean store into these Italian-style coffee houses. He pitched the founders his vision. The three founders looked at him like he just suggested they start selling oxygen and said, "This is America. This Italian nonsense will never work here." So, in 1985, at 32 years old, Howard Schultz said peace out and he left Starbucks. What? You just told us this is the guy who makes Starbucks successful. Is this video a scam? Guys, calm down. I warned you, this story has more twists than a soap opera, because sometimes, to build an empire, you first have to burn the bridge. This rejection could have destroyed him, but Schultz decided to go full villain origin story and start his own coffeehouse chain. He went around Seattle asking for investment money, like me asking for subscribers. Of 242 investors he approached, 217 said no. Let that sink in. That's a 90% rejection rate. That's worse than my Tinder statistics. Schultz was relentless, probably because poverty trauma gives you superpowers that rich kids will never understand. He ended up raising $400,000 to start his own coffeehouse chain. And what did he call it? Il Giornale. That's Italian for the daily newspaper. Schultz was about to pull off one of the biggest reverse Uno cards in business history. Okay, so his unpronounceable coffee house was actually successful. Meanwhile, the original Starbucks was struggling. Remember when I told you the three founders would give up? Well, in 1987, they finally did. And here's where Schultz pulls the ultimate power move. He offered them $3.8 million for Starbucks. That's right, the guy they rejected came back to buy their whole company. And yes, the three founders basically sold their baby to the babysitter they refused to hire. He immediately rebranded all his Il Giornale stores to Starbucks, and in that same year, 1987, he escaped Seattle for the first time. By 1989, there were 46 stores across the Pacific Northwest and Midwest, roasting over 2 million pounds of coffee annually. When Starbucks went public in 1992, they had 165 stores and revenue of just $73.5 million. But investor interest was insane. Way more people wanted shares than there were shares available. It was like trying to get Taylor Swift tickets. Amazing success story, right? From poverty to millions, but don't start writing love letters to Howard Schultz just yet. This man is about to betray you worse than Game of Thrones Season 8. He's got a villain arc coming. By 2004, Starbucks had infected the entire planet. They had 7,000 stores worldwide. That third place concept everyone laughed at, it became America's living room. That white cup with the green logo was basically screaming, "I have $5 to waste on bean water and I want everyone to know it." It was the iPhone of beverages before iPhones existed. Unlike McDonald's, which designed their seats to be as comfortable as medieval torture devices so you'd leave faster, Starbucks stores were designed like a warm hug from a grandmother who charges you for hugs. While McDonald's chairs screamed, "Consume and leave," Starbucks whispered, "Stay forever. We have Wi-Fi and daddy issues." Then came the celebrity collabs that nobody asked for but everyone bought. Taylor Swift's latte probably contained the tears of her exes, and Ariana Grande got a cloud macchiato with enough sugar to kill a horse. They were on every corner like they were playing real-life Monopoly. You'd see a Starbucks across the street from another Starbucks because apparently walking 50 feet for coffee was too much exercise for Americans. Howard Schultz was rolling his coffee kingdom like Willy Wonka. The company was unstoppable. Absolutely nothing could possibly go wrong, right? If you've watched any of my previous videos, I'm sure you can smell what's coming, like burnt coffee beans, can't you? Because Starbucks looked at their perfect business model and said, what if we just did the opposite of everything that made us successful? First up, the mobile app. Initially, this looked like genius-level innovation. Customers could order on their phones, skip the line, and grab their drinks without human interaction. Every introvert's wet dream. The American dream of never speaking to service workers. Mobile orders exploded from 3% to 20%. Sounds great, right? Wrong. This turned every Starbucks into a war zone. Mobile orders were piling up. Meanwhile, actual humans who dared to walk in were waiting 45 minutes for a drink that takes 30 seconds to make. The baristas were trying to make a venti iced, skinny hazelnut macchiato, sugar-free syrup, extra shot, light ice, no whip, while Karen is screaming about phone density. Okay, WiWi, surely Starbucks quickly fixed this problem, right? That's adorable. But no, enter COVID-19, showing up like your drunk ex at your wedding. The numbers are more depressing than my browser history. Global same-store sales crashed 40% in Q3 2020. US traffic plummeted 53%. More than half of all customers vanished faster than my dad when he went to get milk. Revenue dropped from $6.8 to $4.2 billion. By April 2020, roughly 50% of all US Starbucks were closed. Then, Starbucks made a decision they called temporary, and we all know temporary in corporate speak is like just the tip in other contexts. On March 15, 2020, they removed all seating from stores. Every table, every cozy corner where you pretended to study, and grab-and-go only signs replaced the warm welcome signs. And here's the temporary part. January 2023, 3 whole years later, San Francisco stores were still removing seats. That's like saying you're temporarily unemployed while making YouTube videos from your parents' basement. Oh wait, that's me. Starbucks spent 30 years building the third place concept. COVID gave them the perfect excuse to delete their entire identity. And greed played a big role behind the making of that decision. Let me explain. In 2020, CEO Kevin Johnson noticed something while staring at spreadsheets during lockdown. The drive-thru operations were more profitable. Less cleaning, less maintenance, and less liability. Because Karen can't slip on a wet floor if she's banned from the building. They discovered that human misery was incredibly profitable, so in June 2020, he announced an aggressive new strategy. Let's take everything that made Starbucks special and throw it in a dumpster fire. Step 1. Close 400 company-owned stores over 18 months. Step 2 was even more psychotic. By 2023, of all the new stores they built, 86% were drive-thrus, and another 7% were pickup only. That's 93% of new stores with 0 seating. They were building middle fingers to their entire legacy. After 30 years of being a premium coffee experience, Starbucks decided to become fast food without the fast part but keeping the premium prices. While Starbucks was busy destroying itself, competitors started feasting on the corpse. But who needs external enemies when you're treating baristas like they're Amazon warehouse workers? December 9th, 2021 in Buffalo, New York. One tiny Starbucks store did what 40 years of attempts couldn't. They unionized successfully. Basically, they wanted to be treated like humans. The audacity. Starbucks' genius solution? Bring back Howard Schultz as CEO in 2022 for a $1 salary that positioned him as a hero. And the reason was because Howard was known for being anti-unions. And here is the beautiful irony. Brooklyn poverty boy who suffered for pennies was now the billionaire crushing workers. You either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. The board realized their mistake in 5 months, and they panic replaced him with Laxman Narasimhan. So is Starbucks drowning in its own overpriced tears, or are they actually doing something to save this sinking ship? After Laxman Narasimhan failed, Starbucks went full panic mode again. And in September 2024, they kidnapped Brian Niccol from Chipotle. This genius took a company that was literally poisoning customers and doubled their revenue in 6 years. He turned diarrhea into dollars. If he can make people trust Chipotle again, maybe he can make people tolerate Starbucks. But here's where Starbucks showed how desperately screwed they are. They gave Niccol a contract that made other CEOs cry into their private jets. $100 million for 4 months. Let me put this insanity in perspective. Tim Cook runs Apple. He gets $75 million per year. The mermaid is officially on life support, and they're paying doctor fees that would make American healthcare jealous. His strategy is called Back to Starbucks, which translates to, remember when we didn't suck? We're going to try that again. First, menu simplification. They're cutting 30% of drinks because maybe baristas shouldn't need a PhD in chemistry to make coffee. Second, handwritten messages on cups. I'm not joking. Their solution to losing human connection is making minimum wage workers cosplay as your friend, forced to write "hi" while dead inside from their 7th Karen of the day. Next up, bringing back the 3rd place with warm environments and comfortable seating. You know, the thing they spent 3 years actively destroying. The early results are showing promise, but not enough yet. Q1 2025 earnings just dropped, and they're not completely terrible. US same-store sales only declined 4%. Before Niccol, they were dropping 6-7%. So technically this is improvement, the same way getting punched in the face is better than getting hit by a truck. Customers are actually spending more per visit, and stocks are up 10% in a month. Nobody knows which way this will go. Now, I know you're thinking, WiWiPEDIA, this was the best 16 minutes of my life. How can I ever repay you for this gift of knowledge? Well, first of all, you're welcome. Second, I accept payment in the form of subscriptions. Hit that like and subscribe button, because the algorithm brought us together for a reason, and if you don't, then what will you watch next during your lunch break? Drop a comment about your worst Starbucks experience, and I'll heart the best ones. This has been WiWiPEDIA, the channel the algorithm knew you needed in your life.